Hello, BookTube. I've got some mail for you on this rainy, rainy day in Boston. No hint of sun all day. Just heavy clouds that for a long time in the early morning was that kind of seeping pre-rain where it's actually not precipitating, but there's a much larger amount of moisture in the air. It's the very leading edge of a rain system. In this case, a super soaker of a rain system. I've been watching it make its progress towards Boston, so I imagine that later this afternoon and tonight we're going to get poured on here, which, if you could spare me a moment in your prayers. I have a miniature schnauzer who does not like the rain. She doesn't even like the sound of it on the windows when she's snuggled up in bed, and taking her outside to pee, oh, it's going to be a massive battle of wills. And I've noticed with this 10-pound ball of lint that oftentimes in battles of wills I lose. So I'm not looking forward to it. But we have some mail. We have some mail to go through, and it ends in a box. So we'll have that to look forward to. It's not just a box. It's a box by my favorite non-Penguin publisher, W.W. Norton. So it could be something truly squeal-worthy. But in the meantime, let's see what we have here. Okay. All right. This next one is Yale University Press. This is a series of theirs that they're doing that a lot of them I have really liked. And this is Derek Penslar's it's the Yale Jewish Lives series. And the title says it all. They just go through. Some of them have been fairly controversial, specifically the Kafka one. Some of them have been just a wealth of information for me, things I didn't know, like the Warner Brothers. And this is Theodore Herzl, the charismatic leader is the subtitle. This is Derek Penslar's Yale a Jewish Lives series biography of Theodore Herzl. The life of Theodore Herzl, who was born in 1860 and died in 1904, was as puzzling as it was brief. He was a man of contradictions, a cosmopolitan and assimilated European Jew who became the leader of the Zionist movement, an artist and a statesman, a rationalist and an aesthete, a stern moralist yet possessed of deep and at times dark passions. And this biography of him, the first one in English in a long time, I would guess, comes out in February 18th is the date on the sheet here. So not an immediate thing. This has blurbs on it, and some of the others, I don't know if the Yale Jewish Lives series is being reprinted in paperback, but I've reviewed at least one of them, and David Murphy reviewed one. And if I remember, I'll leave links to both of those down below, because one of the things that this series does, as all brief live series do, whether it's Penguin Brief Lives or the very short introduction series or anything like that, one of the things they tend to do that I really like is spur long, thoughtful reviews of the person rather than the particular book. That ordinarily annoys me, but not in a case like this. If somebody does a 90-page soaking wet biography of Grover Cleveland, and the New York Review of Books' presidential authority or somebody chomping at the bit wants to write 7,000 words on Grover Cleveland using that book as a launchpad, I am all for it. And I wonder if every time a new Jewish Lives series volume comes out, I wonder if the same thing will happen. I wonder if somebody will be so fascinated by Herzl and by the Zionist movement that they decide to write an enormously long piece on a book that is itself very short. We shall see. Okay. Okay, so we have a biography. Very good to start off with a biography. Let's see what this next one is. Feels a little hefty. Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't know this was going to be a paperback. Okay, we've seen this already. A very nice looking paperback. Is this a January release? No, this comes out February 18th is the date for this one as well. This is Chang Ho Kei, and this is Second Sister. In what's going to be a trade paperback, $17 paperback. So, murderously expensive, but still not outside the realm of possibility for you to go into a bookstore and buy this. With the arrival of his English language debut, The Borrowed, Hong Kong author Chang Ho Kei captivated readers and critics alike with his nuanced portrait of Hong Kong that spanned 5 decades. In this latest work to be translated into English, so when did he write this? 2017? Huh. Okay, that's not that long ago. 2017. And yet another example of a work translated into English. I'm getting so many works in translation. It's amazing. it's always fun to watch those things happen, because even in January, I'm thinking about assessing all of these books and these trends at the end of the year. And one of my categories for my epic, unparalleled year-end roundup of best and worst books in that year is works in translation. And I've had 35 at least so far in January alone. I love it. I absolutely love it. This book reveals the hidden dramas within a hyper-modern Hong Kong, a city besieged by power-hungry companies courting international investors, high schoolers competing for a place at the top of the academic and social ranks, a serial groper targeting young women on mass transit, and evasive hackers that thrive in the city's digital underground. In the midst of this city that sisters... In the midst of the city live the sisters Ngal Yi and Xiu Man, sharing a simple but contented life together. But their world is suddenly shattered when Xiu Man leaps to her death from the balcony of their apartment, leaving no explanation. Heartbroken and bewildered, her sister can't make sense of this death until she begins to suspect foul play. Could you have foul play? It's someone jumping from the balcony. She contacts a hacker and cybersecurity expert known only as N to investigate, setting in motion a thrilling cat-and-mouse chase through the city of Hong Kong and its digital underground. Okay. All right. Well, I believe I showed you this in advance form, and even then I was totally captivated by it. And February's right around the corner. It horrifies me to say, but it's true. February's right around the corner. Okay, so the second sister comes out in February, and I'm all for it. Okay, so a work in translation. Now we have a bunch of cardboard packages as we work our way towards the box. Although, the books so far have not been consolation prizes. Oh. Okay. All right. This next one is a Penguin Classic. I get Penguin Classics in the mail, and I am overjoyed at that fact. What have we got here? This is Romance in Marseille by Claude McKay. Published for the first time. So Penguin Classics is publishing this for the first time. This $17 paperback will be the first time that you can read this. The depth and breadth of American literary scholarship is such that discovering unpublished works from canonical authors is rare and noteworthy. Seminal Harlem Renaissance writer Claude McKay's never-before-published novel will be available to a wider audience in February of 2020. Wow. Buried in the archive for almost 90 years, Romance in Marseille traces the adventures of a rowdy troupe of dock workers, prostitutes, and political organizers, collectively straight and queer, disabled and able-bodied, African, European, Caribbean, and American. Set largely in the culture-blending viewport of Marseille at the height of the Jazz Age, the novel takes flight along with La Fala, an acutely disabled but abruptly wealthy West African sailor. While stowing away on a transatlantic freighter, La Fala is discovered and locked in a frigid closet. Badly frostbitten by the time boat docks, the once nimble dancer loses both his lower legs, emerging from life-saving surgery as what he terms an amputated man. Thanks to an improbably successful lawsuit against the shipping line, however, he scores big in the litigious United States. Feeling flush after his legal payout, he doubles back to Marseille and resumes his trans-African affair with Aslima, a Moroccan courtesan. All right, so this is... Penguin did his novel Amiable with Big Teeth, and now they're doing this. And this is the first... I've never read this, so that's a rare thing for me, to open a Penguin Classic to something that I've never read. That usually doesn't happen, so that's inherently fascinating. And another February release. So let's move on. Now, this next one is from Oxford, so it will not be February. This will be in the heart of summer. Yeah, this is an August book. This is an August book. No cover, no nothing. This is just the Oxford Advance. This is by Kevin Mattson, and it's called We're Not Here to Entertain. And the subtitle is Punk Rock, Ronald Reagan, and the Real Culture War of 1980s America. I am totally on board already. For many, the 1980s are remembered as in one-dimensional terms, as a decade defined by Ronald Reagan, the MTV generation, and a culture of conservatism and consumerism. I wonder why MTV, that original MTV generation, has not spawned more stuff than it has. Has there been a narrative history of the beginning of MTV, those 5 DJs that we all knew so well, that we all had different favorites? Has there been a movie of those 5 DJs? Or VJs? I don't know. But the punk rock scene of that same era produced ideas and modes of expression that defy these basic assumptions. In this book, Kevin Mattson documents a movement that raged against the bloated entertainment industry and unleashed a culture war aimed at the new president, corporate record labels, FM radio, and eventually MTV. Mattson, who himself was immersed in the punk scene in Washington, documents what Kurt Cobain once called the punk rock world, a hardcore indie culture that expanded beyond just music into self-generated zines, films, fiction, poetry, and graffiti. Rejecting the 1980s consumerist mentality of malls and corporate blockbusters, they espoused a do-it-yourself ethics with a vision of building their own culture. Hard to believe that we can stack the euphemisms this high and never use the word drugs. I guess that's the whole point of the book. As Mattson shows, punks spread far beyond urban centers like New York and Los Angeles and surfaced across the country in places like Kansas, Oregon, Michigan, and Oklahoma. And also famously Salt Lake City, SLC Punk. Okay, well, one of you out there is a punk rock fan. No doubt in my mind that that's true. One of you out there is a diehard, rabid punk rock fan who knows a lot more about the whole culture and the people in it than I will ever know. There's no one listening to the sound of my voice who knows more about Reagan, the Reagan era of the Reagan administration, the top end of this storyline, than I do. But there are plenty of people, I bet, listening to me who know a lot more about punk rock music than I ever will or ever want to. So it's possible that someone listening to me right now might want to look up We're Not Here to Entertain and decide whether or not they might want to try reviewing it for me. I will review this thing. Absolutely. Because one half of the equation I know quite well. But the key half of the equation I don't. So why shouldn't it be you? We have all the way until August. I can mail you this thing. I'd be really appreciative if the person who wants to do this lived in America, so that I'm not spending $75 to send a package to an address that you have transmitted to me wrong. So that the package never reaches you, it never comes back to me, and I'm out $75. If I had a dime for every time I have said to someone, oh, you live in Singapore? Oh, you live in the Netherlands? Oh, you live in rural New Zealand? Well, fine, send me your address and I'll mail you this book. And then they send me their address and then I mail them the book and it doesn't get to them. And I say, well, this is the address I have. And they say, oh, yeah, I forgot to add this. Oh, yeah. Can we try again? If I had a dime for every time that's happened, I would have a mailing fund that would be bottomless. But I don't have those dimes. Instead, I'm out all the money that I spend on those packages because you cluelessly forgot that your district name had to be in your address. When I, of course, don't know that, and then have the unbelievable 21st century kid cheek to immediately say, well, can we try again? Not, I'll send you a check for $75, but can you spend more money on me? So I would, of course, appreciate it if the punk rock fan who's listening to me and who might be ready to gear up for August, you poor little daffodil, you need that many months of warning, lived in America. But if you do, there's a book coming out called We're Not Here to Entertain that is right up your alley. Why not write about it? For me. Anyway, if I'm not giving you sufficient reason not to do that in that previous rant. Anyway, let's move on. Let's see what we have next. It's a little thing. Okay. All right, what is this? This is, okay. Okay, so I honestly don't know who designs these things. Okay, this is And Other Stories. And Other Stories is the publisher. Their colophon is an ampersand. And this is by Luke Brown, and it's called Theft. This is, as you can see, the uncorrected proof. This comes out in February. Or no, in the U.S. it comes out in the beginning of April. Let's see here. What I did to them was terrible, but you have to understand the context. This was London, 2016. Bohemia is history. Paul has awoken to the fact that he will always be better known for reviewing haircuts than for his literary journalism. He is about to be knocked out of his cheap flat in East London, and his sister has gone missing after an argument about what to do with their childhood home. Now that their mother is dead, this is the last link they have to the declining town in the northwest coast where they grew up. Enter Emily Nardini, a cult author who, after granting Paul a rare interview, receives him into her surprisingly grand home. Paul is immediately intrigued by Emily and her fictions, by her vexing, famous, successful partner Andrew, too old for her by half, and later by Andrew's daughter Sophie, a journalist whose sexed-up vision of the revolution has gone viral. Increasingly obsessed, his relationships under strain, Paul travels up and down, north and south, torn between the town he thought he escaped and the city that threatens to chew him up. And the author grew up on a former fishing town on the coast of Lancashire, England, as if you needed to hear that, and is a lecturer at the University of Manchester. He writes regularly for the Financial Times and sometimes for the TLS, the London Review of Books, and the New Statesman. And his fiction has appeared in the White Review, and he lives in London, but there's no mention of a previous novel, so this might be his debut. And this is going to be another paperback original. This is going to be $18 in April. Probably going to look like that, only without the warnings of okay. So is that another trend that we're seeing? More paperback originals? I would be amazed if it took this long for the publishing industry in America, especially, to go to that model. Of course, bring out a much, much smaller print run of every book and issue it as a paperback original so that you can expect to sell it, as opposed to a $45 hardcover. But especially if it's a debut, especially if you're asking readers to take a chance on someone they know nothing about. So I'm glad this is coming out as a trade paperback, one of the many trade paperbacks in this mail haul. So this is, that's April. Okay, a very British novel, it sounds like. And then we have the last of these big white packages, and then we'll have the box. Okay, all right, great. This is the finished copy of something that we've already seen, The Cactus Lead by Emily Niemans. This is the finished copy of that. And this is early February. This is right around the corner. And this is about the new editor of the Paris Review. Or not about, but this is by the new editor of the Paris Review. Let's see here. Okay, when Emily Niemans became the new editor of the Paris Review last year, much was written about her track record of finding fresh voices from outside the established literary circles. Yes. Yes. She has a distinguished track record of finding new literary voices from outside established circles. Notice what's missing from that. That claim is absolutely true. Any of the voices worthwhile? Any of the writers have talent? That's not mentioned. It's just that they're outside of circles. What's been more of a secret until now is the wildly original fiction voice Niemans possesses herself. As her early issues of the Paris Review draw further praise for her as an editor, Farrar, Straus & Giroux is excited this winter to be giving a proper introduction to her as a writer, with the publication of her smoothly crafted, extravagantly entertaining first novel. So this is another debut. And this is, the pub sheet compares it to Chad Harbach's The Art of Fielding. And even more refreshingly, it's different in this book's architecture. At its center is a simple dilemma. When Jason Goodyear, the face of the Los Angeles Lions franchise, reports to the Arizona desert for another year of spring training, something is wrong with the straight-edge all-star outfielder. Something more than the pitches that seem to be suddenly missing his bat, the uncharacteristic defensive miscues, even more mysterious than the sudden private divorce his fans have gleaned only morsels about from the tabloids. As the reader begins to wonder what is wrong with Goodyear, the action moves not forward but laterally through the interconnected characters who populate the Lions' spring training camp. Okay. So the Emily Niemans is the editor of the Paris Review. She's previously co-editor of the Southern Review. She's had works published in Esquire, N+1, the Gettysburg Review, Hobart, and other outlets, and this is her first book. And in her author photo, she looks decidedly irritated. Okay. So we can assume, I think we can assume here, that Jason Goodyear is gay, or is struggling with whether or not he's gay. And we can also assume that he's not going to have a good year. That the novel is going to be about a year long in the duration of its plot, and that he's not going to have a good year. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong. It's entirely possible this author will surprise me. And she doesn't have to wait long to find out if she does, because this book is coming right up. So it's a February release, early February. And I've had this advanced copy sitting there, so I will get right on it. And now we come to the W.W. Norton box, and we'll finish this up. So what is this going to be? What is this going to be? Oh, very good. Okay. All right. This is something we've seen already. This is a finished copy of something we've seen already. That sounded very interesting. Haven't got to it. It's a February release, early February. This is by D.J. Taylor, who wrote the Trollopian novel Derby Day that I reviewed. I wrote a review of it years and years ago when it came out. And this is a work of nonfiction. This is The Lost Girls, Love and Literature in Wartime London. I seem to remember that this got a very interesting review, I think in the TLS, in between when we got the advanced copy and when we're getting this finished one. Who were the Lost Girls? Chic, glamorous, and bohemian. Oh, we saw this already. We heard about this in the advanced copy. As likely to be found living in a rat-haunted maisonette as dining at the Ritz, Lys Lubbock, Sonia Braunwell, Barbara Skelton, and Janetta Parlade cut a swath through English literary and artistic life at the heart of World War II. 3 of them had affairs with Lucian Freud. One of them married George Orwell. Another became the mistress of the King of Egypt. They had very different and sometimes explosive personalities, but taken together they form a distinctive part of the wartime demographic. Bright, beautiful, independent-minded women with tough upbringings who were determined to make the most of their lives in a chaotic time. And if I remember correctly, the review that I read of this was fairly positive. Not that it matters. I will be the judge of whether or not it's a good book. But now I need to get to it because it's right around the corner. February's right around the corner. So that is it. That is our mail haul. Some paperback originals, some debuts, fun stuff. We have The Lost Girls, Literary Society, and even if you're not interested in them, the impression I get is that this is also a broader view of Literary Society in wartime England. Then The Cactus Lead, the debut novel by the new editor of the Parish Review. Theft by Luke Brown, also a debut novel and a paperback original. We're Not Here to Entertain, from Oxford University Press, coming out in August, about the punk rock scene in the 80s. Then we have Romance in Marseille, which is certainly, it counts as a kind of debut because no one's seen it, no one's read it. I haven't read it. It's a Penguin classic of a thing that is definitely not a classic. It's definitely not canonical in any way because it's never been published before. And I remember distinctly older versions of Steve Donoghue would have hated that. Would have called it a profanation of Penguin's mission. But every time they've done it in the last 15 years, I have applauded the results. So even when it's, an author that I don't think is worthy of inclusion at all, I'm still happy to see it. I'm glad they're experimenting. Then Second Sister by a Hong Kong writer, murder thriller, but I'm wondering, the murder thriller elements are perfectly enough to get me to read it, probably tonight. But I'm wondering how good a job it does at that whole other aspect of bringing a city to life. I'm wondering how much of a Hong Kong novel it is, hoping that it's a lot. And lastly, the new Yale Jewish Lives series. This one, Theodore Herzl. Skinny Things, fascinating for that. So, as with all short lives series, the question in any one entry will be, is it better than the Wikipedia entry? And subsequent Wikipedia entries. If you were to call up Theodore Herzl on Wikipedia and read everything that's hot linked, so don't just read his entry, but read everything that's hot linked. So spend an hour reading around this subject on Wikipedia. Would this book be any better than that? And that comes down entirely to the author's style, probably not to the author's research. And that is the acid test, that these little things, the very short introductions, the brief lives, that is the acid test that they all have to pass. Now that Wikipedia and things like it exist, is there more to recommend this than just a short assemblage of facts? I will read it and find out. But anyway, that's the mail for today. It was a rainy day. I'm going to dig right into these things. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.